the Fireside Chat as part of the Fox Hollow. My name is Skylar.
I'm Keelan.
And over the last few weeks, we discussed the complicated and critical issue of overcoming adversity. So there are many types of adversity that we face every day. I think one of the hardest barriers to navigate in life, and one that we frequently come across in life, are external barriers such as toxic people. So we have to deal with a lot of negativity from other people. A couple weeks ago, we talked about how we can be kinder to one another and how that should be kind of the natural state of things. Like, it should be easy to be kind to each other. But today we're talking about how to deal with people who aren't nice.
Who aren't being kind and following the...
Exactly.
Hopefully the norm, but more likely than not, there's more rude people that you come across and that stick in your brain rather than the nice and kind people who do nice things for you day to day.
And I would say that most people are kind of neutral or net positive. Mm-hmm. Which
and
is
it varies.
Fine. And that's all well and good. Like, I say that you're net positive if you have a bunch of neutral people who aren't bringing you down, but, like, aren't your cheerleader.
Yeah.
But they're just kind of like, okay. They just kind of go with the flow. They don't really care that much, and that's fine for, like, your personal well-being. I think you should still have a few cheerleaders in your corner.
Oh, yeah, always.
But if you have a negative person in your life, they will screw everything up. And they will dominate your life, your heart, and your well-being. Like, it's just really stressful. And I speak from experience, which is why you're giving me that look. Like,
yeah.
So for me, I've had to deal with some incredibly negative people, incredibly toxic people. And
I'm sure a lot of other people.
Yeah, everyone,
also.
You're going to run across them because there are narcissists, sociopaths, wackadoodles out there, like selfish people.
All over the place.
Yeah, they're all over the place. So you will encounter them, and like, how are you going to respond? So one thing that I was working on, I'm just like really excited to share it as like a tactic to deal with it, because we talked about it, I think, a couple weeks ago. In another podcast about, like, when to leave the conversation. Mm-hmm. So just repeating that, like, it's okay to say, hey, we agreed to disagree and this conversation's over, and walk away. But another thing I've been focusing on this week is meditation. Yeah. And one of the meditations you can do is, like, a non-responsive meditation where you're noticing... the one that I did was sensation. So it's, like, how your body feels, but as you go along through the week, you can do different ones. So you can do like sound and sight, and eventually you can work up to people. Like, if somebody is being very negative, you can just be unresponsive, and it can just kind of like roll off of you, and you don't need to respond to that emotion, because like, it seems that emotions are not, it's something that we make up in response to stimuli.
The thing
we
is,
don't have to feel that way.
Yeah, the thing is also a lot of when like negativity is said to you, you typically respond with negativity.
Right.
Just as the same when positivity is said to you, you typically respond with positivity.
Right.
You reflect whatever is being said. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're, talking crap on somebody, you're both talking about this person in a bad way. Whereas if you're like talking about how beautiful they are, then you're bouncing back like, oh, they have beautiful hair, oh, I like their eyes, they're this and that.
And isn't it more pleasant to be in those positive situations?
But so much better.
How do you not reflect negativity when it's given to you? And that's like how meditation can help you do that and not respond with negativity. You can either respond neutrally, or you could respond with positivity instead.
Or just not respond.
Well, and that's what the neutral is. Like, either being unresponsive or being like, that's interesting, and then walk away.
That's a cool idea.
Feel
peace.
That's really interesting. Gone.
I see where you're coming from. So that you're not
giving anything, because that's what narcissists really feed off of, is negative energy and like responsive energy. So if you are being like, oh my goodness,
or like, even if you argue with them,
they love it.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for me, because like, I'm like, that is the most outrageous thing I've ever heard.
You are a very argumentative person, which is how you came to be a lawyer.
I'd be like, what are you talking about? And I want to correct it. I like, want to change people's minds, but you just can't, because that's not what they're looking for.
No.
That's not what most people are looking for.
They're not looking for somebody to say that they're wrong and
no, they want that response from you. They want a reaction.
They're not looking for somebody to change their mind, because they have their mind made up.
They don't really care sometimes either. Sometimes they do, but other times they just want a reaction so that they can feed off of your negative energy.
Which doesn't I prefer feeding off of positive energy. It's like people saying positive things, and I would much rather say something positive to somebody and get something positive back. Like, it's kind of the thing where, like, people fish for comments. They're like, oh, I'm so ugly. Oh, my hair looks terrible. And then,
like,
and then people,
like, no.
You can either respond with, like, yeah, you look terrible. Like, oh, you look like a wreck. But that's typically not how people respond to that. It's what they get out of it.
It's like flipping it.
They're negative, and then you say something positive because you're like, oh, they're being down on themselves, and they are beautiful.
Yeah, but they're looking for that.
If you, instead of fishing for comments in a negative way, I mean, fishing for comments isn't great in the first place, but if you go and comment on somebody else, like, you say somebody, like, on the street, you just come across somebody and you like their outfit or something, and you say, like, oh my gosh, your outfit is so cute, like, where'd you get it or whatever, and like, they might respond with
compliments to strangers.
It's like they might respond with another compliment to you, or they'll respond in a good, positive way, you know, and not, instead of like you coming at a conversation negatively and then wanting a positive out of it, or going at a situation negatively and then
to get negative.
to get a negative reaction, or responding negatively to something.
Yeah.
So, because if somebody's like, oh, I love your eyes or something, and you're like, they're just brown, it's like, you're not accepting their compliment, and they like went out of their way to tell you something that they liked about you.
Yeah.
So
just accept kindness and give kindness back.
Everybody has their own opinions.
It's difficult to do that, but
yeah.
So I wanted to talk about a few difficult situations that most everybody is gonna face in their life.
Oof.
And that's toxic people in families, because there tends to be, I don't know, I hear this everywhere I go. It's just like, I have that family member.
Oh, like, this cousin, this aunt, this whatever.
I think that most people are not immune. Like, there's somebody in your family that is causing drama, and
or multiple people,
or multiple people, but at least one person is causing drama. And if you don't think so, you might be the person causing the drama. Like, I don't know. It just seems like there is at least one person in every family who is causing drama. So, and I think it gets harder the closer that person is. Like, you know, we talk about, like, oh, maybe a cousin, or maybe an uncle, or grandpa, or whatever. But it gets really hard when it's somebody's parent, especially.
Or like a sibling.
Siblings too, but the worst one I hear are like their parents, especially moms. Yeah. Like, when there's a parent who's like a narcissist or a sociopath, like,
I know several of those.
Really, really hurts. Like, your entire childhood is like traumatic.
Yeah.
And then your adulthood is not great either, because those people are manipulative.
Yeah.
And toxic. So that's kind of where I wanted to start, and then eventually move to talking about the workplace.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, we kind of talked about workplace too back in our...
Yeah. But I want to retouch base.
Series. Yes.
Because it's important.
It is. And toxic people in all sorts of aspects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of life.
So with family, it's a little hard. With friends, I've had this with friends, but it's a little easier to say bye to them because, you know, you're not related to them.
And sometimes
it's
friends come and go. And
it's still hard to have to do that.
Yeah.
But, you should say bye
to somebody
if somebody is being a problem.
Yeah.
If they're being really selfish, if they're taking more than they're giving. Relationships are a two-way street.
Yeah, which also includes, so, like, you're talking about friendships, and then also, like, a spouse. Like,
relationships, too, yeah.
If you're husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, like, they could be toxic to you, and that might not be what you need in your life. I mean, toxic people are not what you need in your life.
Definitely not what you need. No.
So you might have to come to terms with the fact that that's not healthy for you, and, like, that situation isn't healthy. And then, especially, like, I feel like friends are probably the easiest, but they're still hard because, especially if you've had a friend for years and years, and then you realize it's like, this isn't right. Then you have to cut ties and find new people to hang out with and stuff like that. But, like, being in a relationship with somebody who's toxic is, like, even worse because, like, if you're in love with someone, it's even harder to cut ties and, like, understand what's going on.
Yeah, because they're especially manipulative.
Yeah.
Like, I've dealt with toxic people who are manipulative in, like, all facets of life, but I think that they're incredibly insidious in romantic relationships because the way that they treat people, because they'll have, like, that honeymoon period where they make you feel really special, and then you're like, wow, this is the one, like, they are really compassionate and they care about me, but then they'll just flip on you and make you feel terrible and manipulate
and then they flip
you
back.
Yeah, and then when you're, like, at your wit's end, they flip back, and then they're like, no, I didn't mean it like that.
Everything for you.
And then they, you know, begging you to stay and stuff like that, so until they finally dump you.
Because they're done. They're done with it, and they're moving on. Yeah,
and that can really traumatize people and be like, what did I do? I'm like, no. That person has problems.
Yeah, and also, in their brain. And then it creates, like, trust issues with, like, your next relationship, too. Like, when you put somebody through ups and downs so much, then that's what they expect out of their next relationship. They expect somebody to get mad at them for a month straight and treat them like crap for a while, and then, like, flip and be like, oh, I'm taking you on a picnic, and no, like, everything's okay, hun, like, all that. And then they flip again, and it creates problems for yourself because you become so used to that life and, like, that
volatility.
Yeah, and, like, switching.
It's so unhealthy. Like, there's such extremes. But yeah, ultimately, it's manipulative. Yeah. Because that person is trying to feed off of that energy, and they're...
Always. And it's very emotionally abusive. It is an abusive relationship.
Yes, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, and some of them are physically abusive. And
a lot of times.
But at the very least, like...
It's very emotionally. When you are getting torn down, it is emotional abuse. And a lot of people don't, like, come to acknowledge that is actually what it is, and that you need to find your way out of that to benefit yourself. Just leave. I know how hard it is. I've been there, and it's not an easy thing, and it usually takes, like, one event that really sticks in your brain. You're like, if they could do that to me or this other person, like, if it's your kid or something, if they can do that to this important part of my life, like, what else can they do? You know?
Yeah. That's really scary.
Yeah. And then, like, that's typically the breaking point in either physically or emotionally abusive relationships. And there can be a ridiculous amount of stuff that you can, like, stay in for this person that's just so toxic for you, but it's usually one thing, and then you realize all these other flags after you get out, and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have paid more attention, but it's really not your fault because they're so good at manipulating.
Yeah, they did that on purpose.
Yeah.
It wasn't an accident.
They know your strings.
Awful. Yeah, they're know which buttons to push.
They know your limits. Mm-hmm. They learn your limits and they roll with it. And whether like I'm sure there's external sources, like external people like your friends or family who might see some things like, hey, this isn't right. But you're like, no, it's fine.
Every single time.
Because they
pointed those things out to people. Yeah, because they can see it from a third person objective.
Yeah, but...
Listen to your loved
But you're
ones.
like, it's okay. Because you come up with excuses in your brain because that's what your significant other...
Because they created that special connection that you're like, well, you don't know them like I know them. Mm-hmm. And he's actually very sweet. Or she's actually a very loving person.
Yeah.
And they're just sensitive. Or whatever justification that you come up with. Or they had a dark past. I don't know what it is. But, like, whatever that is, that justification. But, like, your loved ones will see that you are hurting. And I know it's hard. But if you have multiple people saying something, like, that's objective truth from, like, many different perspectives, you know? Whereas, like, from your perspective, you are actually isolated. You're insulated.
You're in the situation.
Yes, and being manipulated, so...
Yeah.
That's really tough, though, to be on either side of that, because...
Oh, yeah.
Ugh, I've seen it too many times.
So, moving on to, like, family aspects of toxic people in your family that you might have to deal with either just at family events, like Christmas and Easter and, you know, holidays.
Yeah.
Or the people who you see on, like, a daily basis.
Yeah, if if family is really important to you and you're only dealing with a toxic person at occasional family events, and you feel like it's important to have a connection with the people around that person and maybe just, like, a civil connection with them, and you can get by, like, you can use the gray rock technique and just try to avoid them as much as possible, but if they try to get you to react to something, you just say, that's interesting, and like, leave the situation.
Be very civil with them. And
because, you know, if you want to maintain those connections, that's fine, that's your choice, but sometimes family members cross boundaries, and when you put up a boundary and say, hey, you can't cross this line that you just are trying to cross, they will get really upset. Because they are trying to cross your boundaries. And as we've found, they'll either get really, really angry. One of our relatives disowned us because we put up a boundary.
Yeah.
She hardcore crossed a boundary, and I was like, no, you cannot. To you.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't say that to her. Like, you cannot say that to her. That is inappropriate.
Can't say things like such like rude
or about you. Like, I was just like, what?
Things about somebody or to somebody.
It was so inappropriate. And I was like, that is inappropriate. That's basically all I said. That's inappropriate. She did not like it at all. She disowned us. And I'm like, okay, fine. You know, if you want to do that. That happens
sometimes. And now we're on civil terms again for like family events.
I don't know.
And whatever, but
because I didn't, like, you know, they blocked me on Facebook, and I'm like, that's fine, you can do whatever. I will leave the channel of communication open. I'll be here on the other end because I'm not inflammatory.
I'm a very, like, even though it was shots fired at me hardcore, I'm still like, I'm not gonna hate somebody forever for blowing up at me over, like, a 2-day period. I think that's what it was. It was like 2 days of like anger and then like blocked.
But that's what this individual has done before. Like, it's just a pattern of behavior.
Yeah, and like,
so I wasn't surprised by it. And so I was just like, okay, fine, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot cross this boundary.
Yeah.
So, And sometimes if you put up a boundary like that and you say you can't cross this, and if you want to stay in my life, you can't cross this boundary, and then they'll say, okay. Mm-hmm. Like, most decent people, like, good-natured people that don't have personality disorders, if they cross a boundary and you say, hey, no, they'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Yeah. I didn't mean to do that. I understand where you're coming from. Toxic people are going to react very negatively to putting up a boundary.
Like, what do you mean? Okay, fine. I'm out of your life. I don't need you, whatever.
Sometimes they're like, you may have to say no. And no is a full sentence.
Yeah.
No is a full sentence. No, period. Because I've had people in my life who've had, like, a parent who was extremely manipulative and toxic, mm-hmm. and they realize, like, this really messed me up growing up, and I don't want my kids to be around this person. And so, they told their parents, it's like, you cannot be around my kids. You just can't. Simply. No. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter how much they were going to scream and shout about it. It's like, no, you can't be around them because you were toxic. And I don't want my children growing up the same way that I grew up.
Yeah.
And that can be really difficult to do. But
especially when it's like that's your either mom or dad that, like, you mm-hmm. grew up with and you have such, like, strong emotional connections.
Yeah, their family.
And they're, like, immediate close family. They're your parents. They're your kids' grandparents. But if you had, like, if your memory of your childhood is so terrible, do you mm-hmm. want your own child to have to deal with those people that made your childhood so terrible? Like, you want the best for your own kids and for your own life.
Yeah, they'll do the same behavior over and over and over again. They're not going to change.
No.
Not people with personality disorders, typically. Not people with especially extreme personality disorders.
Yeah.
And there's only so much, like, again, that you can put up with, what what kind of behavior is okay, what kind of boundaries are they gonna respond to or react to. But if you have to cut someone from your life because they're toxic, it is okay, even if they're a family member.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's a lot of strong feelings about, like, oh no, it's family. You got to keep people in your life. And I'm like, I err on the side of, if you can do that, and if you can get along with everybody, that's great. But sometimes you can't, and maybe you shouldn't.
And so also, if we look back at, like, a previous episode as well, when Charles was here, he talked about chosen mm-hmm. family mm-hmm. versus blood family. So if you have a great group, which I'm sure goals. You all, it's not always about your blood family. It's about who you consider your family, whether they're really close friends. Like, I look at Charles as, like, my uncle. I can go to him and talk to him about things. Uncle Charles. And he's wise, but, like, I can joke with him in a way that we're funny. Friends. And so, like, that's part of my chosen family rather than my blood family. And I definitely mm-hmm. spend more time and go out with Charles more than I do my own aunt and uncle and spend time with them. Like, that's where I spend some of my holiday, like...
That's so true.
And even then, we see...
You really do.
We see Charles around the holidays as well, and occasionally celebrate some things with our chosen family as well as our blood family. So, it's, like, balancing and figuring out what you want to put yourself, like, what situations and groups you want to put yourself in, because mm-hmm. you might only get along with a couple people that are actually blood related to you, and that's fine. It might be like your mom and your grandma, and that might be the only two people that in your blood family that you still get along with, or that are still alive, or that whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's like only a few people that are around there. But then you have your chosen family, you have your friends who are close to you, who you tell everything to and who give you advice on things, and and that's more important sometimes than the people that are related to you.
Yeah. I would say that there's a different connection there too, because there are different experiences that you have with those different people. But ultimately, as I've grown older and matured and realized how short and precious life is, it's like I don't have time to deal with all of the toxicity and all the negativity, and I would rather surround myself with people who are positive and supportive,
care about what you're doing in your life genuinely,
aren't putting you down, aren't being manipulative. Like, that should be the gold standard. And to me, and this is tough too, because I love people and I love to hang out with people. And, but I will say that I have been happier, even though I don't have as many, like, friends now, but I am happier having, like, less friends than toxic friends. Like, there was a time in my life when I was surrounded by people who were not very great.
Yeah.
And I thought that if I lost them, then I was losing friends, and that then I would be miserable. But the reality is that I was miserable with them.
Yeah.
Because they were miserable people. And when I didn't have as many friends, like, yeah, it kind of, it sucks in its own way, but at least you're not around toxic, manipulative people or irresponsible, or like they didn't care about, like, my feelings. They weren't giving back. I was putting so much energy toward them, and the second that I didn't have to do that anymore, like, it was just a relief.
And then, so in my personal experience with, like, toxic friends, like, I've had not necessarily, like, I don't oftentimes hold toxic friends really close in my life, because, like, I realize that it's toxic, and then I'm like, and you're like, and then I just kind of, like, drift off and don't acknowledge that we're not friends anymore, and it's just like, oh, never mind.
That's the way to do it.
Because I kind of float from friend group to friend group anyways. Like, I have different kinds of groups for, I guess, different, quote, like, moods, I guess, or different,
or
like,
more activities.
Different activities, and what, like, because you're not going to have the same, like, drinking buddy. I mean, you might, but, like, if you had drinking buddies versus, like, the people that you go to, like, the arcade with, or to go bowling with, and people like different things.
Have different
so
groups.
It's whatever. Yeah, and, like, people that I've, like, been friends with in middle school versus people that I've been friends with since, like, high school. And, like, sometimes we, like, reconnect and then hang out for a few months, and then disconnect for a few months and then hang out again. And that just, it's kind of like a cycle. But I definitely have had friend groups where they were more toxic, and so, like, I could only handle so much of it. Like, I still liked some of the people that were in it. It's kind of like family. It's like, there's some people there that, like, I really enjoy spending time with, but then there's some people there that are, like, they're annoying and I don't get along with them. And so, like, you can only handle so much of that. It's like, oh,
right,
you know, like, you get invited out every night with them, and you're like, no. It's like, I'll maybe do once a week or maybe once a month, and I'll hang out with you, and then I'll be like, I'm busy the rest of the month. But it's just whatever you choose. There's no, like, standard of what a friend needs to be, other than, like,
or family, or
because you could totally have a terrible toxic friend that you see, like, once a year. But if you care about them and whatever, then it's like, if you can put up with them for one day a year, like, and not keep them, like, super close, but be like, I care about you, but bye.
I don't know.
But I can't stand
For me,
you.
like, I can't, because, like, when I care a lot, so I can't do that. Because I feel like there should be some kind of reciprocity. Like, acquaintances,
It's more acquaintances.
Because, like, even then, because now I'm learning, like, as an older person, that I'm like, even with acquaintances, I'm like, I don't want to waste my time anymore.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like friends are a special class of people to me.
Oh, definitely.
For other people, not so much. like, I've met people who are like, everybody's a friend, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, if that's
literally
your definition,
anyone.
that's fine.
I show up to the bar and everybody in the bar is my friend.
You do you. But for me personally, like, friends are a very special, high class. Like, if I call you a friend, like, that has a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just an acquaintance. And that's fine. Acquaintances are fine. That means that, like, we can chat and occasionally hang out, and that's still good. But, like, friendship it's sacred to me. It is chosen family.
Yeah.
It's basically at that status. If you're a friend, you're chosen family.
Yeah.
Like, it's on par. So, because I have, like, very deep connections with people and find it really important to have that reciprocity. But, yeah, I mean, acquaintances, like, if you can
stand somebody and
yeah,
and hang out with them for a certain...
And then acquaintances are important, too, because you don't know if one day they will be a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how things can,
you know,
like, go down.
Yeah.
But,
which is
yeah,
fun. You don't know what's going to happen in 20 years.
Yeah, it's very true. But I think... No, sorry, I didn't mean to...
Even, like, my close friends are... Like, I don't always hang out with them. Like I said, like, we hang out for a few months and then kind of drift off and then come back to it. And then... And, like, you know, you check in with your friends. That's the thing. Like, with the people that are close to you, you check in on them and make sure that everything's okay. But it's always the thing where you come back... from even if you didn't talk for a year and you talked, it would be like you missed nothing and your friendship is still just as strong as it was. Whereas acquaintances, it's kind of like, oh, what's up?
It's those acquaintances are always like, hey, we need to hang out. I'm like, yeah, we do. Like, let's have coffee sometime, and that never happens.
Yeah,
that's usually goes down.
I've seen that way too many times.
Yeah. Happens a lot. But I did want to get back, and I don't want to lose this kernel, because I think near the beginning of the podcast I kind of went into it a little bit, but I just want to, like, point it out, like, as a truth or wisdom to share. And it's that for people, it's really hard to let go. So when you're in a situation with, like, a friend or a family member or especially a romantic partner, it's really hard to let go of something, to feel like you are losing something. And so when you're in a toxic and manipulative situation, the best mind frame to bring into the situation, instead of like, I don't want to lose this person, because you will cling and you won't leave the situation, is to say, I'm gaining freedom. I'm gaining happiness.
Yeah.
Not that you are losing anything. Because it's true. You're not losing anything that's not worth losing.
Yeah.
Like, constant stress and manipulation, that's worth losing. But, like, you're gaining freedom and happiness and contentment in your life.
Yeah. Which is the important thing. And especially to think about, it's like, nobody wants to, like, tell their parents, like, you can't see my kid, or, like, you can't be a part of my life anymore.
You have to be in that situation.
But if you
are,
you need to tell yourself that, like, that's just for the best, and you're going to be happier, and your life is going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And in your whole state of being, even if you don't have a kid or whatever, and that's just, like, your parents or parent is very toxic to your life, it's just letting them go. And a lot of times it can be scary to let go of the person who raised you and for 18 years and kept you alive. And then you just have to let them go because it's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
And it might...
Thank you, next.
It might eventually be, like, if they turn their life around and figure their stuff out and prove it to you that they can be healthy in your life, then all power to them. But if they have such toxicity that they can't fix that or don't care enough to fix it, then you don't need that around you.
No, yeah. So true.
Yeah, it's really
So the other tough situation is workplace. And I think it's that same philosophy of, like, you don't want to let go, because so many times I hear, like, having a toxic coworker is annoying. If you don't have to collaborate with them, if they're just, like, in the same space as you, that can be very annoying or frustrating. If you have to work closely with them, that can be very stressful. But the thing that I hear over and over and over again is when bosses are toxic.
Yeah.
Because that will destroy you. One day they're going to fire you. That's my conclusion.
Yeah.
Like, it's better if you get out from under it
before
ASAP.
it comes and bites you later.
Because if they don't like you, they're going to fire you.
Yeah.
If they're using you, manipulating you, being really toxic and mean, and you got to find a new job as soon as possible. Get out from under that. And if in your new workplace you're finding the same thing, you need to leave that too. Like, but I think, again, it's so hard for people to leave, because with work, sometimes you just kind of get stuck in a rut, and you're like, well, maybe they'll change, or maybe it'll get better. It's the same thing as a relationship.
It does. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't have to deal with them, and they're
stressful,
having better days, and then... But the thing is, it always comes back to...
Yeah.
Them treating you poorly or being rude to you.
And similar... So... With the family member, the connection is blood. They're family. With relationships, it's like, it's supposed to be like love.
Yeah.
Is the connection, or the illusion of love. And with workplace, it's stability and salary. Like, you're getting paid to be there. And if you lose your job, if you get fired, or if you have to leave it and move somewhere else, that's really scary.
Yeah.
So not being flexible and mobile, but I think that workplaces can be even worse in their own regard, because you are there for like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
It's a big part of your life.
If you are around these people constantly, like family members, again, you might just see them occasionally. Spouse is really bad, or like a romantic partner, because you're seeing them constantly as well. But like workplaces can be extreme if they have a very toxic environment, or like the culture is bad, or like the bosses and the coworkers. Like, if it's a toxic place, you have to get out of there pronto, because you are spending so much time in that environment, and it's just no good. And I've worked in like a place where a boss was like extremely narcissistic and really, really awful. And it was like one of the most stressful experiences of my life. And it was just like a few weeks of it.
Yeah.
And it was really awful. So, but I've also worked in places like where it's just a really positive culture, and people care about each other, and they care about your opinions and ideas, and like that's where you want to be.
Yeah.
You want to be in a place where you're valued and not just a piece of meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, overcoming external barriers. So we talked a lot about people too, but external barriers can also be like if you have a disability and there's no like physical accommodations for you. For instance, like obviously that's a physical barrier to overcome, or if there are institutional issues. We don't have as many of those in this day and age, but they occasionally pop up, and if you ever face those, like oftentimes they're illegal, so you should definitely combat them or like find a different location, because like they're probably not going to respect you anyway. But the main takeaway is like they're going to be people who try to put you down, who are very toxic and negative, and like you're going to have to overcome that negativity and toxicity and be your own positive force in your life.
Yeah. And
prove them wrong, say screw you, and like go and succeed anyway, and get out of toxic situations, and be happy, because you deserve to be happy, and you never ever deserve to be in a toxic environment with negative people.
No, you deserve to live the best life you can and be the best you that you can be.
Exactly.
Overall.
So we are done talking about overcoming adversity. This was our last episode in the overcoming adversity arc, and next week we are starting a kind of mini series on happiness. So we hope to see you next week for how to live a happy life.
If you like what we're doing here, please consider becoming a supporter of the show. The Fireside Chat podcast is part of a new entertainment hub called The Fox Hollow. We have shows about money, gaming, music, legal comedy, and more on YouTube, and we post new Fireside Chat episodes every Monday. If you'd like to ask a question or submit a public comment to be shared on the podcast, please email us at thefoxhollowhub@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please become a patron by donating at patreon.com/thefoxhollow, linked in the description below. You can follow us on Instagram at thefoxhollow.yt. And if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another podcast or video.
If you're not on Robinhood, you should definitely check it out. Robinhood is an online investing and banking app. They give the power back to the people by not charging fees or commissions when you go to buy and sell stocks. Use this referral code to get started. share.robinhood.com/SCHUYLG7. You'll receive 1 free share of a random stock, and you have the chance to win some big name investments like Apple and Berkshire Hathaway. By using this referral code, both you, the listener, and myself will receive a random share of stock. This is a great way to give back to the show while also getting a gift in return. We post new podcasts every Monday and videos every Friday. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next week. Bye!